Moin Gregor.
Moin Thomas.
Gregor, wer ist Gregor? Gregor ist mein neuer Co-Host. Stell dich doch mal kurz vor.
Ja, ich stelle mich ganz kurz vor. Ich heiße Gregor, ich wohne in Leverkusen. Das werden die meisten draußen im Lande nicht kennen. Das ist der Parkplatz zwischen Köln und Düsseldorf. Und ich bin Zugehöriger der Generation X, also genau wie der Thomas. Und ja, fotografieren tue ich gefühlt schon immer. Ich habe das nochmal so ein bisschen rekapituliert. Tatsächlich habe ich mit 9 Jahren meine erste Kamera geschenkt bekommen. Und meine erste selbst gekaufte, in Gänsefüßchen teure Kamera, die habe ich 1984 gekauft. So, und dann habe ich eigentlich bis jetzt immer wieder mit ein paar Pausen, aber eigentlich immer durchfotografiert gefühlt. Ja, mit Street-Fotografie.
Du hast das Thema heute vorgeschlagen, ne?
Genau, das Thema war Street-Fotografie für heute, das habe ich vorgeschlagen und damit habe ich auch irgendwie ganz früh angefangen, ohne zu wissen, dass es das gibt und wie das heißt. Ich habe das dann später rausgefunden, zum Beispiel auch über den Thomas Leuthard und durch andere, dass es sowas gibt wie Street-Fotografie. Dann noch später habe ich dann Communities gefunden, die gemeinsam auf die Straße gehen. Also das war so die Entwicklung, ja.
Sehr schön. Und ich sage jetzt einfach mal willkommen, welcome, bienvenue. Valerie is our guest today. I'm very happy to introduce our guest today in the weekly 52 podcast. The great masters of photography come together here. First Sean Tucker, today the next icon live from Minneapolis, USA, Valerie Jardin. I'm happy to welcome you here. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I understand everything you guys are saying. I just won't try to speak German, but my comprehension is actually still very good. I just don't use it very often.
Then switch to German.
I wish. So we'll stick to English today. I think people will understand it better than my German.
But can you please introduce yourself? Not everybody is involved in photography, so please.
That's right. If people are in street photography, chances are they've heard about me by now. But so my name is Valerie Jardin. I'm French, and I'm currently residing in the United States in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And after a career in commercial photography, about 10 years ago, I quit my commercial photography business and I started teaching people how to see with workshops around the world. And I'm actually just celebrating my 10th year of teaching workshops, and it's been an amazing adventure. So pretty much all my time and energy is spent educating others via workshops. That's the main gig. Speaking at conferences, writing books, and so forth. So, and I did a podcast for 8 years as well. So it's all about inspiring and teaching. That's what drives me, really.
Oh, good.
Yeah, okay. Valerie, it's a pleasure to have you here and an honor. And as I told before, I didn't really think about what I'm doing when I started with street photography. I think the reason why I did so is because it's so versatile. You can do anything. You can do the light and shadow thing. You can do it even without persons in the picture. You can try to hide yourself, or you completely change, which I do in foreign countries, just change modus operandi and ask people for a portrait. So you can do anything. You can look for humor. You can sit down in a cafe. You can run around. So there's thousands of opportunities. That's how I look at street photography. So there's no stereotypes in it, and there's thousands of possibilities, and everybody can choose his kind of street photography that suits best. So
absolutely, I think there's actually often a misconception as to what street photography is. A lot of people think it's being in people's face, but that's one way to do it, and definitely not the way I I hope most people would choose to delve into the genre, because that would probably be the end of it. Yes, there are so many ways, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, there's definitely a way for you to get started, and not to be afraid, because it is not about being in people's faces. Respect is definitely the one rule that we need to abide by.
Yep. We have the connections to the D. Verlag, and there was a new book of you in the market called Street Photography, with several tips, and we got some question about that. But first, I got a question. I can remember you know Thomas Leuthard as well.
Yes, it's been a long time. I actually
Yeah.
I saw him in Chicago
Okay.
probably 5 or 6 years ago. We were
Okay.
both speakers at a conference. We had a fun time.
Yeah. And I can remember a card edition of him with street photography. He releases a deck of cards for street photography, and all contain 10 knowledge cards and 40 task cards.
Oh,
So the knowledge cards provide information from the basics of the image design, like third and I don't know. And the task card each shows an example photo of for inspiration. So they must be combined. And what's your thinking of this kind of teaching? Yeah,
Oh, I
people
think
who are
that's
not really in street photography.
I think that's good. My exercise book is not a how-to by itself. I wrote a how-to street photography book prior to that, I think. But once people already know how to approach street photography and how to the street photography that fits their style, then if they need a little push, then my book comes into play. There are 75 exercises, which actually it's more than that, because some of them, they're different levels. And so it's pretty much, if you go from page 1 to the end, exercise 1 to the end, it is progressive. So it starts with easier exercises and gets more difficult. However, for anyone at any time, you can just randomly pick one page and just hit the streets. That was the point. And actually, when I decided to write that, it's because I kept hearing people telling me, whether it's people that ask questions on my website, on my podcast, or people through workshops, that I want to go out, but I don't have inspiration, or I don't feel like going out. So the way the book is designed, it's like no excuse. You know, if you don't feel like going out, whether it's raining or something, you can pick one exercise, get out the door, because it's really the only way you will improve in this. And
Yep.
so if you sit at home and just get inspiration by looking online at other people's work, you're not going to improve. Or if
Yep.
you keep working on your old photograph, you're not going to improve. You need to go out a lot. And so this book really was for that, so that there's no more excuse not to get out. And the thing is, you'll do the exercise, for example, exercise number 10, for example, and then a few months later, you'll do it again and see how much you've improved. And so it's more than 75 days of exercises. It could be years. So, yeah.
Yep. Good. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, well, during the preparation for our talk, Valerie, I've seen that you have a 10th anniversary of teaching people. So that's extraordinary long time. And yeah, coming from this, I just have a question for me and for our listeners. So you have seen so many participants or students of your workshops. What is the overall, how do you say, what is the question that comes up in each and every workshop, or what causes the biggest aha effect for your students?
Well, everyone is different. And I see people over and over again because I have a high return of students. So I've had students who've taken 10 workshops in just 5 years. So people tend to want to learn in a small group. The camaraderie of the workshop is phenomenal and so much fun that people meet friends on a workshop and then they say, oh, well, next year we should do the Copenhagen workshop, or the year after we'll do Rome. Oh, let's go to Paris again. So that's a very common thing. So so it's great too because I see people's growth from year to year and how much they've improved from workshop to workshop. So everyone's different. Usually people come and they're afraid that they don't know the technical part of photography too well. They feel like they're too beginners, and actually it's great. I always love it when somebody is new to photography because they're usually the ones that will see better and quicker. The more experienced people are, the more they're going to be worried about the technical aspect of everything, and they're going to miss shots. Really? So it's really letting go of so much that you've learned in order to really be able to see. Your camera is so secondary in this whole process. You have to forget you even have it in your hand. And so you need to know your gear well, for sure. Although I've had some photographers come with the latest, most expensive camera and end up spending the whole week with their phone because then they have limitations and they are really focused, if I may use the term, focused on seeing, not so much on, oh, which lens should I put, or, oh, maybe my settings are wrong. So I think new photographers tend to go over that quicker because they're not so bogged down by gear and technical knowledge.
But it doesn't matter. First of all, I put always the automatic mode, and that is sometimes it's enough. You don't have to worry about all the settings. You get crazy. So just look on your focus, and that's the main thing. You have to learn to see, and then press the button, and the camera do the rest. No? That's the slogan. No?
It's street photography is not the time to be in full manual. It's very rare that I switch to full manual. I'm usually in aperture priority. I mean, you need to control your camera because it has no idea what you want to see or what you want to say. And so, for the most basic form of street photography, yes, full auto will work. And then, you get into more complicated things like you try motion and panning or actually motion blur, all that, then you need to know your gear, but it's a step-by-step process, for sure. You still need to recognize what will make a good street photograph, because there is a lot of really mediocre work out there. So you still need to know what will make a strong photograph, and then not settle for a bad subject or a bad backdrop. You need to really be able to see, first of all.
I got a question. What exactly does black and white photography means to you? And what do you think is the thing to the viewer? Most of street photographers do this black and white thing. Some others, like Joel Meyerowitz, turn to color. And it works as well, but they're so deep in the DNS that it must be black and white. I'm always confused about that.
I think a lot of people...
And your photos as well.
I do probably 2/3 black and white, 1/3 color. And for me, it's really all depends on the subject. So I don't make that decision like, oh, today I'm going to shoot black and white and tomorrow I'm going to shoot color. No, I make that decision before I press the shutter. So if the subject is all about color, then it would be a crime to shoot it in black and white. And I literally
Yeah.
make that decision in camera because I shoot JPEG for that purpose. I make the
Okay.
decision of color in black and white before I press the shutter. And I always tell my students, even if you shoot raw, and that's totally fine, people still shoot street photography in raw. I don't really see the point, but people think that they are real photographers only if they shoot raw, so that's okay. I'll let them think that. And so even if you shoot raw, you should know before you press the shutter if it's a color or a black and white subject. It's not something that you should decide in post-processing. Then you don't learn anything. You really learn by making those decisions before you press the shutter. And it's very rare, almost never, that a photograph will be as strong in black and white as it is in color. So sometimes the black and white will, if there is an emotion, and color is too distracting from that emotion, then for sure black and white will be a lot stronger. But I don't think it is, street photography should be done in black and white. No, absolutely not. If you only shoot black and white, or if you only shoot color, you will not be drawn to the same scenes, to the same subject. So I make that decision when I see the subject.
Okay, good.
Valerie, when I looked at your photographs, and also when I read your latest book, the one called Street Photography Assignments, 75 Reasons to Hit the Streets and Learn, I also saw one exercise, a nice German word, Übung, about timeless situations, timeless people, buildings where you don't see that it's from today, but from the clothing, kind of building, kind of situation of the street, it's timeless. So is there something that fascinates you about timelessness in street photography?
Yes, absolutely. And it's not what I only look for, but it's so rare to be able to capture a moment that is timeless. First of all, it's so difficult now to not have cell phones in pictures. I don't photograph people on their phones. That's my pet peeve. I can't stand it. And so it makes street photography much more challenging, because nowadays it's really rare to, for example, if a waiter is on his break, on his cigarette break in Paris, very rarely is he going to be, or she going to be daydreaming or having a conversation. They're going to be on their cigarette break with their phone. And so that totally kills the moment. So when you have the timeless moment where there is no car visible, no phones visible, it's a different types of street photography, because we want to, in street photography, I think it is important to have an idea of time and place for a lot of it. Then there is historical value. When we look at the work of Cartier-Bresson or Vivian Maier, we're interested in the way people are dressed and the cars that you see in the background that give some information of how people lived in the time. So I think that is very important in street photography. But for some of my work, I'm thrilled when I see a timeless subject, whether it's rarely around here. I see New York will give us some timeless situations, but a lot more so in Europe. I think Paris will give me a lot of timeless moments. I spent a lot of time back home in Normandy, and I've seen a lot of timeless moments there that you have no idea if it was 1950 or today. And so that's kind of a challenge I give myself. I have yet to put together a gallery of just timeless moments, but I'm planning on doing that, because it's like a treasure hunt, a little, in a way, to find that moment that is truly timeless, of someone, reading a real book or the newspaper dressed in a certain way that doesn't have big logos and things like that. So I'm drawn to that. And I never photograph people with big lettering on their shirts because that's so distracting from the facial expression. And overall, to me, that is not interesting. I mean, we all have our different aesthetic of what a good street photograph is. I look for certain things that somebody else won't. For me, I like elegance. If I'm in Paris, I look for a certain type of people. I don't photograph tourists when I'm in Paris or in Rome. I really want authenticity. And so I look for that. Other street photographers look for something completely different. And that's a good thing. Otherwise, we would all be chasing after the same people on the street.
Yep.
Yeah. While acting as a photographer, many people try to stay, how do you say, anonymous, which is the title of your book. They want to act unobstructive without being sneaky, but they are kind of inhibited. What do you have some advice for photographers like them who don't want to be, how do you say, talking to people, being recognized, whatever?
Yeah, and I did write an ebook called Anonymous a few years ago because there was that concern about privacy law, and then people said, well, that's the end of street photography. Well, not necessarily. There are many ways you can make compelling photograph without your subject being recognizable. So you can do a lot of silhouette work, which in itself can be very artsy. You can do, you can photograph people walking away. The subject has to be a lot stronger if they're walking away because you don't have that facial expression to make the photograph. So you have to be even more discerning. You can do a lot of abstract work using natural filters between you and the subject, such as something comes to mind. Recently, I photographed through a clear umbrella, and it was all wet. So I focused on the umbrella that I was holding, and I photographed people through it. But the people, you can still see the human forms, but it's very abstract. So there's so many ways to photograph life, everyday life, that doesn't have to be close to people or people even being recognizable. So I think everyone can find a way to do it. I think ultimately, even if you're a bit shy to start, you will be drawn to getting closer and closer, and you'll be drawn to the human emotion, and that will eventually become part of your work. But sometimes just to get started, if you want to be a little bit further away and do a more minimalist approach, that's okay too, as long as you're out there. And so I think there is a way for everyone to get started. I love being close to people, and with experience I've learned, and I shoot at 23 millimeter all the time, so I'm never hide behind a long lens. I've learned to be invisible, or to really photograph people without bringing the camera, even without even looking at the screen, just shooting blind, because I know my camera so well. And so I've captured really intimate moments that are full of emotion, because I've learned to be very inconspicuous. And that's what I teach too, because people want to get those photographs, but they don't want to look sneaky, or they don't want to disrupt what's happening. Because if you're seen, obviously people are going to stop doing what they were doing, and then there is no photograph. So why bother at that point? So really it's important to be very, very invisible if you want to get close.
That brings me to the next question. Many photographers hit the street with various cameras, even more lenses. So that's for me. It's very
Not on
funny.
my workshop.
Yeah, I know. Why do you limit yourself to a single lens camera?
Well, I think
not talking about your contract.
they're very. I've been shooting with the Fujifilm X100 series for over 8 years now. And that's 99% of my work. Occasionally, I'll I'll use another camera for the lens baby lens, for example, because I love those creative focus lenses. But I always have 2 of my X100 cameras with me when I travel. I have always a backup camera. I have one that's set for rain, that's completely sealed, and the other one that has no filter in front. I don't like having anything in front of my lens. And so 23 millimeter is perfect. It's 35 on a full frame. 35 millimeter is a perfect camera for everything. I went to Iceland with that focal length.
Yep.
So it's a little wider than the way you see, but once you're familiar with a focal length, you're so much quicker. And street photography is all about capturing that fraction of a second that never happened before and will never happen again. You won't be even able to capture that photograph again ever in your life. So you have to be able to react so quickly that if you start moving your zoom lens, that you're done. That's never going to happen. So you need to really be able to see life through at that focal length. That way you know exactly where you need to be to capture exactly the frame you envision. And also I find that consistency in a body of work is important. If you have some pictures that are shot at 200 and then at 23 and then at 50 and then at 60 in a gallery, I think it's distracting. I think the consistency in a focal length is good. That said, 23 may not be for you. You may be a 50 millimeter street shooter. As long as you're not hiding behind a zoom lens, because you're not going to get that same effect. So I would say anywhere between 18 and 50, there is a focal length there for everyone. And even when people don't have a prime lens, I think prime lenses, whether you have a camera like mine that you can't even remove the lens and that's what you have and you live with it, which I think is ultimately so liberating. But if you have a zoom lens, well, don't buy any new gear. Just use that zoom lens. Just put it on 35 for a week and see what that does to you, and then put it at 50 for a few days and see if that's better. Don't invest right away in prime lenses. Try to find the sweet spot. Try to find the focal length that fits your vision and your style, and then you can invest in gear. So I tell my students on workshops, even if they come with a couple extra lenses, and I think it's okay, especially when people are a little new or they've never done street photography before and they're used to having lenses to choose from. First of all, the one they pick to leave their hotel in the morning is the one they're going to stick with for the day, hopefully for the week. Then they have free time, so they want to try something different, that's fine. But I really encourage them to just put the lens on their camera in the morning, take a couple extra batteries, and that's it. Technically, they don't need a camera bag at all. So
Good. Yep.
That's the way. I think a happier photographer is the one that doesn't carry extra gear. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Valerie. I think 1 year ago or so, another street photographer from Cologne wrote an article about what do I do if I have problems with my motivations to go out. You already mentioned that it's not a good idea to work on old photographs or just study books. It's about going out. What if you are, let's say, a more or less experienced person, but have a problem with your motivation? What do you do, or what do you tell your students?
Well, if it's street photography, and it's been difficult for street photographers for the past couple of years. I mean, life on the street is not, well, it is starting to be more normal again, but for many months, it was pretty depressing out there. So if people are not motivated, first of all, they don't have to practice street photography only to become better photographers. They can even practice photographing things in their homes. Contemplative photography is another one of the things that I teach, is really about opening your heart to ordinary objects around you and making beautiful photography without manipulating anything, without even touching objects or rearranging them. Just photography is like a dance. You have to move yourself to make the strongest possible frame. So whatever you do in your own environment, whether it's on your on your window or by the light of your window, is going to teach you to become better when you're out on the street anyways. So also I encourage people to have some projects. Try to have one or two series in mind. They can be long-term projects, they can be short-term projects, but that will get you out the door. The book is a great way to get out the door, or other books like that have that give you exercises and assignments. I think it's great because at least you have a goal. Go out and just practice panning for a couple of hours. At least you'll be out, you'll learn something, and you'll have fun. You just have to get out. So I always have several ongoing projects. So even if I'm on the street and I'm like, there's just nothing that's really appealing to me, we all get into that. Everyone gets into a funk and doesn't feel inspired. Well, then I will work on reflections, or I will photograph hands for my Stories of Hands series, or I published a book on dogs, and so for a long time I would go out and just photograph people and their dogs, or humor with dogs. So it's a lot
dogs.
harder than it seems. Humor is an exercise that will keep you busy for a long time, because that's one of the toughest challenges for the street photographer. So there is a story everywhere. You just have to see it. And that's the thing. People just look and they don't see.
for a type like you. Yeah? In our last podcast, we had Sean Tucker as our guest. And
Great.
He said he wanted to discover new things that refresh creativity. Well, and he tried landscapes. And his photos were bad and he was disappointed. And then he published his experience and pictures in a YouTube video. And the reaction was overwhelming, because so many artists have experienced the same way, but they don't dare to admit their failure. So did you ever try something new and completely different, like landscape?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, that's how I started. I did wildlife photography. I mean, I've pretty much tried everything. And I think a good photographer should be able to photograph pretty much anything. Yes, you're not going to be, you're not going to excel at a new genre right away, but you should be able to see it like nobody else does. And I don't like post-processing, so my nature of photography, I'm very minimalist. I live in a place where we have snow for 5 months every winter, 5 to 6 months. So it's very minimalist landscape, and I love it. And that doesn't require any post-processing, which I love. I give me fog and snow and a tree and a fence, and I'm really happy. I could play all day. So what I don't like is manipulating photographs, like changing sky because the sky is boring. To me, that's not photography at that point. And I'm a photographer. I have no pleasure in spending time in post-processing. Some people, that's their thing. They spend very little time behind the camera and a lot of time in post-processing. Well, that's because they love it. I don't think anyone would want to do that if they didn't like it. So there is something for everyone, but it's good to look at the evolution. And if I look at even my pictures from 5 years ago, I'm like, how could I even show that? Because you're constantly evolving, and that's a good thing. If you're never there, that's the good part about photography. You're never the expert. You're never the master. You're never, if one day I felt like, I think that was my best picture. Well, then what's the point of taking the camera out again, then might as well hang it in the closet. So you always look for something more challenging. You always look for a situation you haven't seen before. And that's wonderful on the street because there is always something you haven't seen before. You start really doing more complicating technique. Like if, for example, silhouettes. I love silhouettes, but they're pretty easy. I mean, technically they're easy. So you have to find amazing subjects. And then you want to add another element of difficulty to your silhouettes. You're going to, add a sunburst. So now you have the sunburst. Now you have to wait for someone really interesting to enter your frame. I mean, those are all elements that are going to make the photograph that much more rewarding, because what are the odds of not moving because you have that sunburst ready, and that once you have the sunburst, you can't move or ever so slightly because the sun, it's gonna move a little bit, and then you have to stay there and wait for a phenomenal subject to enter your frame. That's fun. I could do that all day. I'm very discerning, and I never stage anything. I would never ask someone, "Oh, could you walk here? Could I do this?" Never. It's always 100% candid. And so
that's interesting because I made the podcast with Thomas Leuthard, and he said he's getting to a point where he never saw anything new. So you're the opposite of that. You're always increasing. I think you're enthusiastic, and you're telling, everything, and I do better and better. So that's the opposite point. Of
tell
his,
Thomas we have to have a conversation together.
Yeah.
I need to boost his.
But
Give him a boost. There is always something new. There is always something new.
Okay.
And I think it's sad to think like, I don't see any. That would be very depressing. And people say, well, you've been teaching workshops for 10 years. I teach about 12 international workshops every year, and aren't you tired of going to the same places? No, if I was tired, I would do something else. Workshops is not something you do if you don't like it. You have to absolutely love it, because you have to give your passion to everyone who is there, and that has to be communicative. And so I always... I cannot be in the street of Paris and feel uninspired. And I'm in Paris all the time. That's the workshop, that is the constant. All the others I change. I have new cities every year. But Paris, I will never get tired of Paris. And so when I hear people who live in Paris who feel uninspired, I'm like, wow. That's crazy. Granted, the grass is always greener, with the neighbors. Yeah. But... it's you need to, and you should actually be able to do your best work in your own environment. So I'm very familiar with Paris, and I know where to go for great shots at any time of day, and that's an advantage. So when I'm in a new city, it's much harder to do good work than it is in a city you're familiar with. So no excuse, really.
Yeah. Valerie, at the beginning of our inspiring talk, we were talking about why go people to workshops, and it's not only because of listening to experts like you, it's also to get to know each other inside the workshop, the students amongst each other. So I looked at your website, looking at your schedules and your workshops, and I saw nice places like Paris, you mentioned that, Rome, New York City, Copenhagen. So I think there's...
You avoid Germany.
There's worse...
there
could be worse places than that. But my question was, when do you come to Germany or to Switzerland and meet Thomas again, or to Austria?
Actually, I was in Zurich in 2018. I think I was in Berlin in about the same year. So I do. There are two workshops that I wrote that are rotating. So like I would be in Portugal and Berlin. So I usually do a warmer place in April. This year it's Rome, and then Copenhagen in August. And then August I will be more in a northern city. So I do add 2 cities. Actually, I'm planning on going back to Zurich eventually. And I love Berlin. I know Germany quite well. There's so many cities that I want to go back to. It's just, there's just not enough time. I always come back to to Minnesota in between. So, sometimes I only have 2 or 3 weeks between 2 international trips with, a 7-hour, 8-hour jet lag. So it's not always very easy, but I do more and more in Europe and less in the US.
Okay. So I'm coming to my last question. Your motto is chasing light, in German Lichtjäger. That's funny. Is there another side of Valerie, like escaping shadow or something like that?
I love deep shadows. I love bright lights. I really like contrasty situation. I like when there is mystery. I hate when people bring out too much details from shadows. That's one of the things that I don't like, because it breaks the mood. And I know we can do that because we have the tools, but it's not always a good idea, like deep shadows. I follow my heart. That's how I approach every day when I'm with my camera. I follow my mood. There are days where I want to interact with people, and there are days where I don't want to even get near people, and then I will be a lot more minimalist, and I will play with light and shadows and silhouettes. And there are times where I really want to capture that emotion, where I'll get close to people without disrupting what they're doing. So every day is new. I rarely go out with I never go out with a photograph in mind. I let the street really surprise me. And if it's a bright, sunny day, then I'll usually follow the light. And if it's not, I love a rainy day. I love fog. There is not a day that is bad to be out there, except when it's too cold and the camera can't handle the cold. Because it can get really, really cold here. I'm talking,
Yep.
minus 30, minus 40. So those days, then you have to find other ways to photograph. Then I usually go to artist studios and do a visual narratives of artist friends that are painting or something like that. There's always something to do. And whatever you do, whether it's street photography or something else, as long as you're out there with your camera, you are learning. Even if you miss the shots, you're learning. One thing I hear on workshops all the time is students telling me, "Oh, I just saw this wonderful thing. Those people were kissing and I missed it." I'm like, well, you didn't miss
Next
it.
time.
You saw it. And that's more than most people. That's more than 99% of the population. You actually saw the moment and saw the beauty in the moment. You didn't capture it in your camera. That's one thing. But you learned because you saw it. You just didn't react fast enough. So there is learning all the time. We miss more than we capture. But that's the way it is. If it was easy, it wouldn't be fun. So
Nice saying. Really nice. Gregor, do you got another aspect?
No, I think that was very interesting. Talking to you was an honor, and I wrote down some sayings. The one I liked most was that photography is about dancing. That came
it's like a dance. Yeah,
it's like a dance.
It is.
So, and it was a pleasure to talking to you, and thanks for your inspiration.
Thank you, and
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you on the streets sometime.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
Come to Berlin.
To Cologne, to Vienna, everywhere.
Yeah.
So, I'm talking now in German. Oh, it's funny because we got Thomas Leuthard in the next podcast as our guest. So, but we're
You'll have
talking
to
about.
say hi from Valerie.
Yes, of course, I do.
Blast from the past.
And we're talking about Brettspiele, what's that in English? Strategic games, gaming, old gaming with figures. What's that in English? I don't know. I don't know.
Sitting down, with the family and playing on the table. I don't know the English word for that.
Or like game boards,
yes, game boards.
Game boards.
Like board games.
Like Brettspiel in German. So we're talking about his. Wir reden über seine geliebten Brettspiele und das wird der nächste Podcast sein. Thank you very much, Valerie. Everything goes.
Tschüss.
So see you next time. Bye bye.
Tschüss.
Bye bye.